The morning light over Richmond crept slowly across the tops of the tobacco warehouses, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Henry Brown walked with a steady, quiet determination, the hem of his shirt brushing against his calloused hands as he moved. To the outside world, he looked like every other enslaved man hired out to work in the city head low, steps controlled, expression unreadable. But inside him, something burned. It had been burning for months, ever since the day slave traders arrived without warning and took Nancy, his wife, and their 3 children. Henry had run home as fast as he could, only to see an empty yard and hear the fading echo of wheels rolling down the road. Neighbors had whispered that Nancy cried his name until the traders forced her into silence. From that moment on, Henry had carried a grief so sharp it felt like a blade twisting in his chest. He knew slavery could take everything from a man: his dignity, his labor, even his body. But losing his family carved a wound deeper than anything he had endured before. Today, that wound was the reason he walked toward the warehouse, not as a worker, but as a man preparing to risk his life for the only thing left worth fighting for: freedom. Inside the warehouse, Samuel Smith paced nervously between stacks of wooden crates. Smith, a white shoemaker who lived on the outskirts of the city, had agreed to help Henry for a price. But even he seemed shaken by the boldness of the plan. The crate sat in the center of the floor, deceptively ordinary: rough wood, iron bands, faint scent of sawdust. But it was no ordinary box. It would carry a man. It would carry Henry, 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, 2.5 feet deep. Henry approached it, running his fingers over the grain of the wood. This would be his coffin if the plan failed. It would be his birthplace if it succeeded. Smith cleared his throat. "You sure about this?" Henry didn't answer with words. He simply removed his coat, folded it carefully, and placed it inside the box. Then he stepped into the crate and crouched, drawing his legs toward his chest, tucking his arms around his knees. The cramped darkness pressed against him even before the lid closed. Smith hesitated for several seconds. Then he lowered the lid and began hammering nails into place. Every strike reverberated through Henry's skull. When the last nail went in, Henry's world became black. Moments later, 2 workers entered and lifted the crate, grumbling about its unexpected weight. Henry held his breath as they carried him to a wagon outside. The wheels jolted violently as the wagon lurched forward, each impact shaking Henry's curled body. He breathed slowly, carefully. The air inside the crate was already warm. He whispered to himself, "Hold on." The wagon rolled toward the Adams Express Company shipping office. Dogs barked, men argued, horses snorted. Henry heard every sound as though through a thick veil, his body crammed tightly against the wooden walls. He knew the risks. If discovered, he would be beaten, tortured, or killed. If the crate broke open, his hope would shatter with it. If anyone heard him breathe, everything would end. But Henry had made peace with the risk. He had nothing left to lose except the life he still believed could begin on the other side of this darkness. The crate was lifted again. Henry felt the shift in motion as he was carried into the Adams Express building. Labels were checked, prices discussed, payments made, and then silence. Only the faint creaking of floorboards beneath him. Henry pressed his cheek against the wood. This was the beginning, the first of many miles, and he intended to survive each one. The crate tilted sharply as workers shoved it toward the loading area behind the Adams Express office. Henry braced himself as the box struck the ground, jarring every bone in his body. Moments later, he felt strong hands grab each side of the crate. "Get that one up. Train leaves soon," a man said. Henry steadied his breath as the crate lifted into the air. The movement was rough, unbalanced. The men carrying him had no idea a human being was curled inside. They loaded the crate into a railway car with a loud thud. Henry's vision pulsed. He tasted blood where he had bitten his tongue. The door of the rail car slammed shut. Then the whistle blew, and the train lurched forward. The vibration of the wheels on the track shook the crate relentlessly. Henry felt every jolt in his spine, his shoulders, his hips. He tried to shift, but the box left no room, no freedom, no space for relief. Heat built quickly inside the crate. Sweat dripped down his face. His breathing grew shallow. He pressed his palms against the boards, focusing on counting small breaths. 1, 2, 3, trying to keep his panic at bay. Hours passed. Then, the worst moment of the journey struck. Men entered the cargo car. Henry heard them moving boxes around. "This one's upside down," one said. "Flip it." Before Henry could brace himself, the world inverted. Blood rushed to his head. His neck bent painfully. His chest compressed under the weight of his own body. He tried to inhale deeply, but gravity crushed the breath from him. His vision blurred. A ringing filled his ears. His fingers tingled. The edges of consciousness dimmed. He whispered, barely audible, "Lord, hold me." Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the crate was lifted again, rolled into a new position, and set down upright. Henry inhaled a sharp breath, sucking in the cooler air now reaching him through tiny cracks. He lived, just barely. Outside, the train rattled on. Rain began to fall against the roof of the cargo car. The rhythm soothed him, eased the pounding in his chest. He had no idea if he had been inside for 6 hours or 16. Time dissolved in darkness. But Henry knew one thing. He was still moving north, still defying the world that tried to break him, still believing in the miracle waiting at the journey's end. And that belief kept him alive. Henry had no sense of time when the train finally screeched into a slower rhythm. The rumble beneath him softened, then quieted entirely as the train slid toward a station. Voices echoed outside, louder, sharper, more hurried. Workers shouted instructions as cargo was unloaded. The crate shifted again. Hands grabbed it. Boots thudded against the floor. Henry braced himself as the crate lifted and swayed. This time, the men moved with confidence. The noise in the background was familiar to Henry from his years working around warehouses. This was a major transfer point, not a small depot. He had reached Washington, D.C., the capital city of a nation divided. The city was busy, crowded, and dangerous for any escaped enslaved person, even those traveling openly. Hidden inside a crate, Henry felt those dangers pressing against the wood like ghosts whispering warnings. The men unloaded the box onto a wagon. "This one goes north," a worker barked. "Philadelphia. Philadelphia." The word shot adrenaline through Henry's body. He closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. He was close, painfully close, to the end of this ordeal. The wagon rolled over uneven cobblestones. The movement, though harsh, brought Henry relief. Every jolt kept him awake. Every vibration reminded him that he still had control over one thing: surviving. The rain had stopped, but the wood of the crate held the dampness. The faint smell of wet rope, fresh mud, and horses seeped through the cracks. Henry breathed it in, imagining the open streets, the lights of the city, the possibility of stepping onto free soil. The wagon halted abruptly. Voices approached. "We'll have to check these labels." Some were damaged in transit. Henry's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He held his breath. "If they open the crate now, not this one," another man said. "It's paid in full. Let it through." The crate shifted again. Wheels clattered. A door creaked open. Henry felt a different vibration beneath him now. Not train tracks. Not wagon wheels. A ship. The floor beneath him swayed ever so slightly, up and down, as if breathing. The crate had been placed on the deck of a steamship bound for Philadelphia. The engine roared to life, the deep churning of water pushing the vessel forward. Henry felt every movement, every sway, every shudder of the hull. The box vibrated with the steady pulse of the machinery. Somewhere above him, Men walked back and forth, boots against wet planks, crew members shouting instructions, the flap of sails tightening, the groan of ropes pulling taut. This was the last leg of the journey. Henry tried to stretch his fingers, but they were numb. His legs felt like stone. His back throbbed with each small adjustment of the ship. His breath came in shallow gasps. He whispered to himself, almost there. But the ocean was unpredictable. Midway through the voyage, the ship hit rougher water. The crate slid a few inches. Henry's shoulder slammed into the wall. Pain shot through his neck. The ship rocked again, and the crate thudded against another box. Men above shouted. Waves crashed. The hull groaned. Henry clenched his jaw until it ached. He could not faint. He could not lose control. Not now. Rain pounded the deck. Water splashed through gaps in the planks and dripped onto his crate. He felt a cold drop strike his cheek through a crack, a startling reminder of the outside world. Hours passed. Then the rain eased. The crew's footsteps softened. The ship steadied. A bell rang. They had reached Philadelphia. Workers rushed to unload cargo. The crate was lifted one final time, carried down the gangplank, and loaded onto another wagon. Henry felt the change immediately. The air was fresher here, lighter. The atmosphere different from Richmond, different from Washington. There was a calmness beneath the noise, a sense of structure, a feeling of possibility. He was in the north. Minutes later, the wagon stopped on a quiet cobblestone street. The crate was carried into a building. The door shut behind them. Silence. Footsteps approached. Men whispered. A crowbar wedged into the lid. Light cracked through the wood. And Henry Brown prepared to be reborn. The first sliver of light cut across Henry's face like a thin blade, forcing his eyes closed. After nearly 27 hours in total darkness, the sudden brightness overwhelmed him. Dust from the wood rained onto his forehead as the men pried the lid open further. Cool air rushed inside. Henry inhaled deeply, a long, trembling breath filled with the reality of freedom. The smell of paper, ink, and old wood drifted toward him. Voices from above fell silent as the lid finally lifted away. 3 men stood over him, lanterns casting warm halos behind their heads. Their mouths hung open, eyes wide with disbelief. They had read the letter explaining what was in the box, but seeing Henry curled inside, alive, struck them with awe. Henry blinked several times, his vision adjusting. Then, with a raspy voice barely above a whisper, he said, "How do you do, gentlemen?" The room froze. One man stepped back, hand pressed to his chest as if steadying his own heartbeat. Another covered his mouth, fighting back tears. The third leaned forward, whispering, "My God." He did it. They reached down to help him. Henry tried to move, but his legs trembled violently. His muscles had stiffened, locked into the contorted position he held for nearly a full day. They lifted him gently, supporting his arms as he attempted to stand. When his feet touched the ground, Henry nearly collapsed. 2 men caught him, guiding him to a cushioned chair. He sat heavily, breathing in slow, uneven gasps. His limbs tingled painfully as blood began to flow again. "Take your time," one said softly. "You're safe now. Safe." The word washed over Henry like warm water. Someone handed him a cup of cool water. He sipped slowly, savoring each drop as it slid down his throat. His vision sharpened gradually. The room came into focus. Shelves stacked with abolitionist pamphlets, newspapers, maps of the Underground Railroad, and desks cluttered with letters. This was the office of the Anti-Slavery Society of Philadelphia, a place where strategies were planned, lives were saved, and now, where Henry Brown had been delivered to freedom. One of the men knelt beside him. "Sir, your courage is beyond anything we have witnessed." Henry shook his head slowly. "Courage," he whispered. It was desperation and hope. They nodded, understanding more than he intended to say. A few minutes passed before Henry spoke again. "Where am I?" "In Philadelphia," the man answered. "You're on free soil. Free soil." The words sank deep into Henry's bones. He felt the weight of them, heavy and sacred. Tears welled in his eyes, sliding down his cheeks without resistance. He was free, alive, his body trembling, his spirit rising. After several minutes, the men helped him stand again, his legs still weak but steadying with each attempt. One of them placed a warm coat around Henry's shoulders. Another offered bread and tea. Henry ate slowly, each bite filling more than his stomach. It filled the void inside him left by years of pain, loss, and cruelty. When he finished, he turned to the crate that had carried him from bondage to freedom. He placed his hand on the rough wood. "This box," he whispered, "gave me the life they tried to take." The room remained silent. Then Henry said the words that would later be quoted across abolitionist papers everywhere. "I came out of that box a free man." The days following Henry's escape unfolded with a mixture of relief and danger. Philadelphia was free soil, but the shadow of the Fugitive Slave Act stretched even into abolitionist offices, casting long, ominous warnings. Yet for the first time in his life, Henry woke without a master's demands hanging over him. He slept in a real bed. He ate warm meals. He walked streets where he was not forced to carry a pass. Freedom felt fragile but miraculous, like holding a candle in a storm. William Still, one of the most respected members of the Underground Railroad, visited Henry daily. Still's presence was calm, steady, anchored by compassion and sharp intelligence. "You are safe for now," Still told him one morning, "but your story, it is bigger than safety. The world needs to hear it." Henry listened quietly. He had spent years silenced. Now people wanted him to speak. But the truth inside him ran deeper than a simple retelling of events. "I don't want them to know the journey of the box alone," Henry said softly. "I want them to know why a man would choose to bury himself in darkness just to breathe free air." Still nodded. "Then, and that is exactly the story you must tell." Henry began meeting with abolitionists in small gatherings. The rooms were modest. Rented halls, church basements, private homes. But each was filled with people hungry to understand the truth of slavery beyond the sanitized words printed in Southern newspapers. When Henry stood before them, he did not shout or condemn. His voice was quiet, steady, carrying the weight of memory. "I did not escape because I was brave," he would begin. "I escaped because they took everything from me." He told them about Nancy, about the children, about the day the wagon carried away his family, about the emptiness that swallowed everything that remained. People wept, people gasped, people listened. But Henry didn't tell the story for applause. He told it because if the world understood the cruelty he endured, perhaps it would move faster toward justice. Still encouraged him, reminding him that every word he spoke became part of a larger movement, a force pushing against the system that had tried to break him. Henry's voice grew stronger with each telling, his message clearer, his resolve sharper. The danger lingered outside every window. Slave catchers were already searching. Rewards were rising. Notices were spreading. Freedom was slipping through his fingers even as he held it. Henry Brown had one final journey ahead. A journey across an ocean. A journey toward a new life. A journey beyond the reach of men who saw him as property. Soon, he would have to choose between the land of his birth and the life he was finally beginning to claim. Philadelphia had welcomed Henry with open arms, but freedom carried a price. Word of his escape spread quickly, not only among abolitionists, but also among those who saw him as stolen property. Southern newspapers filled with outrage. Slaveholders seethed. Some called his escape an insult to their authority. Reward notices appeared. Descriptions circulated. Rumors of bounty hunters heading north spread like wildfire. In the Anti-Slavery Society office, Henry sat reading one such notice. His hands shook slightly as he held the paper. Henry Brown, dark complexion, 34, believed to be in the north. Substantial reward for capture. The room was silent, except for the faint scratch of quills against paper. William Still watched Henry, his expression somber. "They will come for you," Still said. "You must be ready." Henry folded the notice and set it aside. "I will not go back," he said quietly. Still nodded. "Then we will protect you. But we cannot rely on hiding alone." Abolitionists began moving Henry from safe house to safe house. One day he slept in a Quaker home near Pine Street. The next, in an attic above a print shop. The next, in a cellar lit only by candlelight. Each place offered kindness, warm meals, blankets, whispered prayers, but none offered permanence. One evening, while Henry ate at a wooden table inside a modest brick home, a young abolitionist burst through the door. "They're here," he gasped. Two men from Richmond were seen near the wharf asking questions about a wooden crate. Henry froze. Still placed a hand on his shoulder. "We knew this was coming." "Where do I go?" Henry asked. "To safety," Still answered. "But not in this country." A secret meeting was held that night. 5 abolitionists gathered in a candlelit room, their faces half-shadowed. A map lay across the table. Names of ports were circled. Ships were listed. Passages were calculated. Henry sat silently at the end of the table. His fate hung in the balance, shaped by men fighting for the same cause, but struggling to agree on how to protect him. One man argued he should be moved west. Another insisted he remain hidden. A third said what Still had already suggested: England. Henry spoke softly but firmly. "I will not be taken back. Whatever road keeps me free, I will take it." The men exchanged glances. England. The word carried both hope and sorrow. Hope, because it meant safety. Sorrow, because it meant leaving behind everything familiar, including any chance of finding Nancy. Henry closed his eyes. He could almost hear her voice. "I will find you again," she once told him. But slavery tore promises apart. Finally, Still spoke with calm authority. "England is the only place beyond their reach." "We will send him there," the room agreed. Henry's next journey would not be in a crate, but it would still change his life forever. Once the decision was made, everything moved quickly. Abolitionists secured Henry a seat aboard a ship leaving for Liverpool. They acquired clothing, papers, supplies. They rehearsed routes, planned alternates, timed patrol shifts, memorized streets. Henry moved quietly through the preparations, his heart heavy but resolute. Philadelphia had been his brief refuge. England would be his permanent haven. As Still packed a satchel for Henry, he spoke softly. "You are not running away," he said. "You are running toward life." Henry nodded. "I understand." Still paused. "Do you regret it? Any part of this?" Henry thought deeply before answering. "I regret the world that forced me to choose," he said. "Not the choice itself." The two men shared a long moment of silence. In a way, Still had become the closest thing Henry had to family in the North, the brother he found in freedom. Their bond was born of struggle, trust, and shared purpose. That evening, Henry visited a church for a final time. The sanctuary was dimly lit. Wooden pews creaked beneath the weight of worshippers. A soft hymn rose from the choir, the melody drifting like smoke through the rafters. Henry sat alone in the back, hands clasped tightly together. His prayer was not a request, but a statement. "Let me honor those who never had a chance to escape." The choir sang, steal away home." The words pierced him. He felt Nancy's absence. He felt his children's faces fading in memory. He felt the ache of leaving the only land he had ever known. But he also felt something else, a rising strength that steadied him. He whispered, "I survived the darkness. I will survive the ocean." That night, Henry stayed in a safe house near the river. A woman named Eliza brought him a bowl of stew and warm bread. She set it on the table and said softly, "You carry the hope of many." Henry looked up. "I am just one man." "You are one man who showed others what is possible." Henry bowed his head, humbled. He didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a man still finding his place in a world that was finally opening to him. As he lay in bed that night, he couldn't sleep. He thought of his family, of the box, of the men who would drag him back if they had the chance. He whispered into the darkness, "I will live. For all of us." The night Henry left for the ship was moonless. Clouds drifted low, blocking the faint glow that might have revealed a movement of shadows along the street. Still walked beside him, their steps synchronized and quiet. 2 other abolitionists followed close behind. The air was cold, and Henry tucked his coat tightly around him as he moved through narrow alleys. At every corner, still paused and listened. Every lantern was a threat. Every silhouette a possible hunter. They traveled mostly through back passages, between stables, past sleeping inns, behind warehouses where workers snored inside warm lofts. The city felt alive, but in its own quiet, dangerous way. "Stay close," Still whispered. Henry nodded. They approached the waterfront. The smell of salt and tar grew stronger, a sharp scent of departure. Ships creaked softly as they rocked with the current. Ropes groaned. Water slapped against the wooden piers. A lantern flickered at the end of the dock. "That's the signal," Still said. "Your passage is confirmed." Henry's heart pounded. His mouth went dry. He swallowed hard, forcing his fear down. They walked toward the ship, a large vessel preparing for early morning departure. Crew members moved crates and barrels with practiced precision. As Henry approached the gangway, Still reached out and took his hand. The kind of gesture men shared not casually, but when words failed. "You came here in a box," Still said. "But you leave here as a free man standing tall." Henry felt a tightness in his throat. "Thank you." For everything, Still gripped his hand firmly. "Live well. Speak the truth. The world needs you." Henry nodded. And then, without looking back, he stepped onto the ship. The wood beneath him felt solid, real, final. A crewman guided him to his berth. After checking papers, the man gave a simple nod. No suspicion, no fear, no recognition. Just another passenger. Henry sat on the narrow bunk, breathing deeply. He was truly leaving America. When the ship finally pushed away from the dock, Henry stood on the deck. Philadelphia shrank in the distance, the last city he would ever see in the country of his birth. He touched his chest. "Let me never forget," he whispered. The voyage across the Atlantic lasted 2 weeks, each day marked by the noise of creaking wood, crashing waves, and the distant cries of seabirds. Henry spent most of his time on deck or in quiet corners of the ship, watching the water stretch endlessly around him. At night, he lay in his bunk listening to the ship's heartbeat, the deep, rhythmic churn of the engine. It reminded him of the box in a strange way, confined, trembling, dark. But here, the air was free. He could stand, walk, breathe. Some nights he woke with panic, thinking he was still inside the crate. His breath would catch, his chest tightening. But then he would touch the cool metal frame of the bunk and whisper, "You are free." As the ship approached England's coastline, excitement spread among passengers. Henry stood near the rail, gripping it tightly. A gray-blue landmass rose from the mist. England. A country without slave laws. A place where slave catchers held no power. A place where he could live without fear. When the ship docked at Liverpool, the port buzzed with activity. Workers unloaded cargo. Passengers disembarked. Vendors shouted. Music drifted from taverns. Henry stepped onto the dock slowly, almost reverently. This was the first soil he had ever touched where no one could claim ownership of him. A wave of emotion washed through him. Relief, exhaustion, pride, grief. He swallowed hard, fighting the tears rising in his eyes. A man approached him, greeting him warmly. "You must be Mr. Brown. I've been sent by London abolitionists to welcome you." Henry bowed his head slightly. "Thank you. We will take you to lodging, and you can begin anew." Anew. The word warmed him. As they walked through Liverpool's streets, Henry felt people looking at him, not with ownership, not with suspicion, but simple curiosity. No one saw him as property. For the first time in his life, Henry Brown walked the street fully as a man. Henry Brown's life in England began humbly in a small rented room above a print shop in London. The walls were thin, the bed simple, the window drafty, but it was his. No overseer, no master, no threat. For the first time, Henry belonged entirely to himself. Abolitionists helped him secure invitations to speak in churches, halls, and theaters. Crowds gathered to hear the man who escaped slavery inside a wooden crate. Henry stood before them in a clean coat, his posture tall, his voice steady. "I traveled in darkness so I could stand in your light," he told them. His story spread across Britain. Newspapers printed his words. Posters announced his lectures. Audiences rose to their feet in thunderous applause. But Henry never forgot his roots. Never forgot Nancy. Never forgot the children whose faces faded over time. That pain became part of his message, part of his purpose. He wrote his autobiography. He educated. He performed. He inspired new movements. Henry Brown built a life, a real life, far from the shadows of Richmond. And though he carried scars the world would never see, he transformed them into strength. Years later, he remarried. He raised children. He lived, not as a slave, not as an object, but as a man who had outrun a system designed to crush him. A man who had become a living symbol of defiance, courage, and resilience. A man who proved that freedom can be carved out of darkness, even from the inside of a wooden box.